Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of eHeroes. This is episode 195. So we're getting very close to 200, and I'm bringing back a guest that we haven't seen for a very long time, almost 4 years. In fact, if you go back 171 episodes, he was on episode 24. Kevin Thompson, thank you for being here. And we're going to talk about creating $1 million relationships because this is what you're all about. And when we interviewed you, when we like, I have a split personality. When I interviewed you a long time ago, that podcast was called Being a Connector. And I think as you evolved as an entrepreneur, you have all these brilliant relationships that you've built over time that now you're starting to reap the benefit of those connections. And instead of just connecting people that make 30, 40, 50, 100,000, you're connecting people making 10 figures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting, and wow, I'm thinking like 4 years ago. Where was I 4 years ago? A whole different spot that we're in right now, for sure.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, even 4 years now, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to our interview again because I want to kind of find out what state of mind was I in 4 years ago, and what did I think about things then? Because just four, you can look at it either way: 4 short years, 4 long years, whatever. It seems to me that the time just flew by, but I can tell you we're in a whole different spot right now than we were 4 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And and
Well, just over the last 2 years with the pandemic, everybody's way of thinking is different.
yeah,
And as an entrepreneur, the pandemic, I think, really changed how we think. Not just our mindset, but the way we get out of bed, the way we do things. Because I know so many entrepreneurs got depressed because they couldn't do what they really wanted to do. They were stripped of their freedom. And for me, it was, hey, I already work from home. So for me, that wasn't a big thing. For me, it was I couldn't go out. I couldn't do anything. Restaurants were closed. Back when I saw you up in Tacoma, we met in Seattle. That
yep,
restaurant that we couldn't even go to the one restaurant because they were still saying, hey, we have to have proof of vaccination. We have to see your cards and this and that and wear a mask. And I'm like, that's not freedom.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Luckily you knew of a place that we could go and we had a great time and it was just great for our wives to meet and I really appreciate that.
yeah. Well, it always pays to be resourceful, Rob. so,
Plan B. Yeah.
but yeah, you're right because I can, and like you, I work from home, so I wasn't impacted in that way. But I know the one way that I was really impacted was I love going to events, to mastermind groups, to
Mhm.
that kind of stuff, and interacting in person, face to face with other entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders, and that came to a screeching halt.
Oh yeah.
That
Yeah.
came to a screeching halt. So I was really impacted in that way. Uh, and that was definitely a challenge, for somebody who just is such a social person to have that kind of taken away. I became really grateful for Zoom over the last couple of years, as a lot of other people, and Zoom
Yeah.
has been a big beneficiary of all that.
Yeah. Although, I the one thing that I've noticed though is people got zoomed out. And the longer that I'm on Zoom, the weaker I feel. I mean, it just kind of
Yeah,
zaps that energy from you. And for me, it was like, okay, I have to restrict the time I'm on Zoom. Yeah, granted, I use Zoom to record these podcasts, but I try to, restrict. Okay, I'm going to only do half hour today and an hour tomorrow. But I know people that are doing 8 hour Zoom classes, and I'm thinking, good Lord, how do you do that?
yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, well, and for me, what it is, I believe, is what is the engagement? What is the experience that we're having? What's the interaction like? So I do spend a lot of time on Zoom, but it's with fascinating people that I just enjoy speaking with and being around in that way. And
Mhm.
so, but even in that, you're right. I mean, you know, well, I've got a close friend of mine. I absolutely love him, and he does these 3-day events on Zoom,
Mm.
and it's a challenge. I've never participated in one because for one, it's a challenge to fit it into my schedule,
Right.
and also really the thought of being on Zoom for 3 full days, it's not appealing to me, you
Right.
know. And
Yeah.
so,
And I don't mind these one-on-one interviews, and I've had a few where they're 4 or 5, but beyond that, when everybody's image is reduced to a pin dot and you got 30, 40, 50 of, forget it. I can't focus on individual people, and
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, forget it. It just I want that. I want that ability to be able to see people in real life and see their animation and if I have to be able to hug them, I'm not a hugger, but I have that ability to do so.
uh-huh, yeah,
You just can't do some of those things on Zoom. And like you said, the events, I would go to events not to hear people speak because I've heard the same speeches over and over and over. But the hallway deals and the sit downs that you have with people and meeting them for lunch, and those are where the real relationships are built,
yeah,
and those take home deals, that's where they're flourishing.
yeah, yeah. And so since we're kind of talking about $1 million relationships here is kind of the direction we're going. And we're talking about events. I'll bring something up because you and I were at. I mean, we can say whose event it was. I mean, it was at Steve's event in California last year,
Mhm.
and there was probably, I don't know, what, 40 people at that event and stuff. And then there
Yeah.
was some, and and most of them are pretty great people. And but you can't meet everybody in the course of 2 days. It's impossible.
Right.
But on one of the breaks, on the second day in the afternoon, so it was the afternoon break, I ended up talking with this guy Rob, who was there at that event,
Hmm.
and I just started asking Rob a question or two about him, and he ended up like telling me about himself and what he did, and it was so fascinating that I kept.
Not
I
not
just
me. It was another Rob. I mean, all Robs are great. I understand, but this is not the split
That's
personality
right.
Rob.
It's
This
not.
is
It's not you. I already knew you, man. and, uh, and you know what? I'll just say who it was. It was Rob McClelland, is who it was, and stuff. And but before you know it, the break was over, and Steve was like telling everybody, come back to your seats. Got next person going to share and all that. And Rob is like, my gosh, Kev, I am so sorry. I talked your ear off the whole dang time, and I didn't get to find out anything about you. And I was like, you know what? I was like, no worries at all, Rob. I was like, we can make time. We'll connect later, either this evening or we'll just follow up after the event or whatever. And we did that. We did that. But here's the thing: most people who go to events, especially if they're in networking mode, they're there to network
right.
with as many people as they can, as fast as they can, because it's limited time. You only got a short window here, 2 days in this man.
Yeah.
That I got to meet everybody in this dang place, and passing out cards and this and that, and and I'll tell you, anybody who's ever done that, I'll just ask, how's that been working out for you?
Right.
You know, um,
And the funny thing is that I haven't used a business card in years. I
yeah,
don't use those digital cards. People are like touch their phones with this. Bleep. I don't use those either because I think they're annoying. People say, "Well, Rob, how can I learn more about you?" Go buy my books,
there
um,
you go.
or give me your address. I'll mail you a book, and I get more business that way. And it's like, okay, yeah, yeah, I got a stack of business cards from people. It's like I just toss them. I
Yeah.
don't care anymore. I mean,
Well, you
I
get
can't.
home and you don't remember who it was.
Yeah,
Because and the reason is because you didn't have any meaningful interaction with them.
right.
That's why. And you get home with all these cards and you're like, I don't know who none of these people are. And because the way you connect with people is by making them feel a certain way, and the way that you make them feel a certain way, there's don't screw up and try to put a bunch of strategy behind this, because you'll mess it all up if you do that.
Right.
It's you the way you people don't feel seen, heard, or understood.
Mhm.
And the really simple way to make people feel seen, heard, and understood, and give them this amazing gift that hardly anybody ever gives them, is when you ask them a dang question, shut up and let them answer. And let them talk about themselves a little bit. Let them talk about, I mean, like Rob, I think I asked him, hey, what are you working on right now that most excites you? Well, that got him on a roll. And he talked for 15 minutes, but because then I was asking him, based on what he shared, I was asking him more. Oh, well, tell me more about that. What was that like? And it just kept him going. And the thing is, for me personally, that's not an act. That's not a strategy. That's not, I mean, I am genuine. I love talking with entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And if you don't love that stuff, well, don't try to don't try to make yourself network if you don't want to.
Right.
But you know what? If you want to do this, and if you really want to make a connection, a real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable connection, then do that.
Right.
And it's how we make people feel.
Right. And I'm not discounting social media. We can make connections all day long, and we all look and say, oh wow, look how many connections I have. I have 5,000 on Facebook and 12,000 on LinkedIn. Blah blah. They're not. I mean, some of them could be real connections, but when you meet people face to face and have a 15-minute conversation where you're just listening, that's a real connection.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And sometimes we look at all these numbers, and especially the gurus who are out there teaching false marketing, and they're like, you got to have big lists, and I understand the whole concept of big lists, but the thing is that I only need one meaningful client to make me money.
Mhm.
And when you're dealing with multimillionaires, I mean, one client could be all you need.
That's right.
So it's I think sometimes we get lost in the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I know from the perspective of dealing with small clients to medium-sized clients to multimillionaires, they think on a different level. They appreciate on a different level, and that connection is a lot different than having a connection with a client that only pays you 20,000 or 30,000 a year.
Hmm. I can tell you that, like, well, you and I met because we were both in the cleaning and restoration industry years ago. And to my knowledge, a successful company in that industry, I mean, a really successful company would be doing 300, maybe 400, 500,000 a year. I mean, half a million a year. Man, you're the top, like probably 3%, maybe even lower if
Right.
you're doing half a million a year in revenue.
Yeah.
Because most of the companies in that, they're probably doing in that industry, are doing less than 100,000 a year in
Hmm.
revenue, gross revenue. And I can tell you from personal experience that even though that was my background and that's where I came from, and I was in that industry, and thanks to our mutual friend Joe for helping us really, both of us figure out our marketing message and how to communicate with the kind of clients that we really wanted to have. I mean, I really owe Joe a lot for that, because that insight that he shared with me, maybe, my gosh, that goes all the way back to 97. Now I'm dating myself, and you. And
Yeah, I signed up with Joe. We're talking about Joe Polish and Piranha Marketing, and I signed up in 1998. So I'm right there with you. And no, I didn't get involved with Piranha as much as you did. You went to more of the events, and I stayed back and struggled with the business until I developed my own sense of copywriting and marketing, and when I decided that enough was enough in the cleaning field, I got into the coaching and publishing and marketing field, and to me that was the greatest transition, because people look at me going, you were a carpet cleaner and now you're teaching lawyers and doctors? How does that even happen? And then I have to share the whole story with them, and they're like, wow, can you do that for me? So it's, hey, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's right. We give other people hope. And, whether I can tell you in doing what I do, I mean, yeah, I'm a connector for a lot of influential people, but what I really am, and with the way I view myself, is I am a steward of the relationships that I have in my life. I'm also a steward of the revenue that comes into me, meaning that I'm going to take the very best care that I possibly can of these people, because I care about them. I love them. I appreciate them. There's not a single person that I work with that I wouldn't invite into my home for dinner with my family and I. Mm-hmm. And then the same is true with the revenue that comes in. I try to be as good of a steward as I can with that, meaning that I take out money to be able to support my family, my wife, my children in a way that makes me feel good. We do tithing, we save a little bit, and then pretty much everything else, it just kind of flows through. Mm-hmm. And because I am a good steward of both the relationships and the revenue, more keeps finding its way my way, mm-hmm. And as far as and so what I figured out is I can do what I do, build relationships with somebody doing $100,000 a year, $500,000 a year, $1 million a year, or what have you. Or we could, I've got people that I am friends with and that I help out that are 60 million a year, 70 million a year, even more than that. Mm-hmm. And the effort that I put in, the time that I put in, the work that I put in to help these people, it's the same no matter who I'm working with. It's not harder or easier depending on who I work. It's the same. Mm-hmm. And the difference is that, and I'll tell you the difference, and I can tell you what really motivates me to do this in the first place. But the difference is somebody who is at a higher level, they have a bigger footprint already. Mm-hmm. They're more resourceful. They have more resources, and so the impact is bigger.
Right.
And for me, that's what motivates me, is I want to make as big of an impact in this world as I can. And I learned a long time ago that if you want to make an impact, you don't try to do it all by yourself. Mm-hmm. You do it with other people. And you also do it with other people who they too, because like all the people that are in my world, do they want to grow their businesses? Yes, they all want to grow their businesses. They all want to add revenue, but it's not about the revenue. In fact, if you start talking, hey, man, I'm going to help you make a whole bunch more money. They're going to be like, Kev, I don't need your help with that. I kind of got that figured out, you know. That is not the messaging that resonates with them. Right. What they want to do is they want to make a bigger impact in this world. And they all know that revenue is the byproduct of that. They already know that. Mm-hmm. And so, so that's kind of the thing that I've figured out. And for me, last year I ended up watching this Garth Brooks documentary. It's a 3-hour show split up into 2 1.5-hour segments. It was on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on there or not, but Garth Brooks tells this story of this guy Pat Quigley, and I'll tell it really quick because it'll set the stage here. But this friend of his, Pat Quigley, him and Garth were sitting at dinner one night, and Pat asked him, "Hey Garth, you ever thought about playing in Central Park?" And he's like, "Central Park?" He's like, "Man, that's a pretty kind of a big deal." And he's like, "Man, that would be kind of cool." And he's like, and he's like, "As far as I know, Pat left that night, and I hadn't heard from him in a while. But unbeknownst to me, he ends up getting a hold of the people at Central Park and is like, hey, if I got Garth Brooks to come play and we got HBO to come film it and all that, would you guys open the park for us? And they're like, you got Garth Brooks and you got HBO? Yeah, we'd open the park for you. Then he goes to HBO and he's like, hey, if I got Garth Brooks to come play Central Park, they opened the park for us. Would you guys want to be a part of this and film a special and all that? And they're like, you got Garth Brooks playing Central Park? Yeah, we want to be a part of that. Then he goes back to Garth and he's like, remember that conversation we were having about you playing Central Park? Well, HBO wants to be a part of it. The park's opening up, and if you want to come play, they want you to come play. And Garth's like, wow, yeah, I'm in. I want to go do that. And it ended up being, and they got, they're showing the whole thing. They had millions of people show up for this concert in Central Park. And you can rest assured that none of those people had a clue who this guy Pat Quigley was. But I can just imagine Pat Quigley sitting on the side somewhere at that event going, you know what? I did this. I made this happen right here. And that inspired me. So I was like, I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy making that kind of an impact in this world. And I don't care if all those millions of people know that I was even there. I don't care, because I know what role I played in that. And ever since then, and you know what? It's funny, Rob, because ever since watching that movie, it's been right about a year now since I watched that documentary. And I set that intention. I was like, that's the role I want to have in people's lives. That's how I want to play. That's how I want to do business. And ever since setting that intention, I look at what's happened in the last year and who I'm in regular everyday conversation now. It really kind of makes my head spin when thinking about what a ride it's been in 1 year.
Wow, and I love that story. For me, it was, my story takes 35, 36 years. And everything that I did, in high school, working with computers and the dreams that I had of being a writer and things that I thought would never happen are all coming together. And I'm like, over the last few years, became a writer, I'm coaching, I'm teaching, I'm doing this. And I'm thinking, these are all the dreams I had when I was a teenager. Why now? And subconsciously, I've been pushing myself forward to those goals that I didn't even know I had. But I'm meeting interesting people along the way who are encouraging me to do more and be more and achieve more. And as I get older, it's like, okay, what do I want to leave behind to the next generation? What's my legacy? What am I going to be known for? Those are things I never thought about all those years ago. But as I meet people like you and Steve Sims and Joe Polish and people that I know that were just like me, in fact, are just like me. So why can't I be, achieving more just like them? And things are starting to connect now, and people are like, Rob, I want to hire you. Rob, do this. Rob, do that. And I'm getting better types of clients. I'm it's kind of astounding, when you think about it, when, and sometimes I do lose sleep about it, thinking, wow, this is kind of awesome. Because I look at kids today, I look at other people, they want to be an entrepreneur, but they don't have the, what I call the stick to itiveness of it. They don't want to stick it out, because these things have made life too easy. We use these as marketers, we use these as tools. This is an expense. I mean, this is kind of an investment, but we know that, okay, without this, some of this may not happen. However, we're not dependent on this. Where you see all these other kids are out there, they don't have jobs, or not very good jobs, but they're on their phone taking calls and taking texts. And I'm thinking, dude, you do more phone calls than I do, and I make probably 10 times more money. It's just priority.
Yeah.
For you, the time that you put into a business, listening to people, connecting people, that is awesome. But then, other people, I have a job, or I do this, or I do that. I'm like, Yeah, but you know what? If you retooled your thinking, you could be just like, you, Kevin, or me, or anyone else. And that's why, they although they say, the level of entrepreneurship is growing, only a fraction of them stay in business more than a year. And hardly ever, hardly any of them stay beyond 10 years. And
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 27 years. You've been doing it for, probably the same amount. And, so it speaks to the level of our dedication.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, we're just clinically insane and too stubborn to quit.
Could be a combination of all of that.
But yeah, what I've noticed though, you can't sell people, especially millionaires, on an idea of making money, because they're already making more than you.
Yeah.
So you have to sell them on an idea that, helping them in such a way enables them to do something other than make money.
Yeah. Well, so my partner Jules and I, we started this little community 2 years ago, and it's called Tribe for Leaders, and it's right now we got 39 members in that community, but the way we started it was we just had a vision for what we wanted. We wanted to have this space, and we launched it in March of 2020 because we had actually had an event scheduled to happen that month, and because of COVID, it did not happen. And so we were just like, you know what, let's start doing some stuff on Zoom. And like we would just invite like 4 or 5 entrepreneurs onto a Zoom call, and we kind of had this format that we would use to let them share, and the whole purpose was get them to connect together and then help each other out, and like people were having having a good experience with that. And they even were asking us, well, what are you guys going to do more of this? And we're like, yeah, we could do more of this. And so we were taking that into play, and then we started signing people up for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started reaching out to other people that I knew already and said, hey, we've been doing this thing on Zoom, and we're really being selective about who we invited. Here's what we want to accomplish. And would something like that, would that be valuable for you? Can you see yourself being part of a community like that? Mm-hmm. And it was just asking them, and then like, when they said, man, that sounds interesting. And then I wouldn't start telling them about it more. I would ask them, hey, what would make this a big, huge win for you? What would make this a big win for you? What would need to happen for you to have this be a win and be a hell yes for you? And it was just having those conversations and hearing from them, not trying to sell them on my thing, but just hearing from them to see, okay, are we in alignment? Can we deliver? Do we feel like we can deliver what they just said would make it a big win for them? And if we feel we can make it a big win for them based on what they just shared, then we would invite them to be a part of it. And that's how we grew the thing. And then beyond that, just existing members telling other members now that they'd had this experience. And so we didn't do any broad market advertising for this at all. It was all just reaching out to people that we knew already. Mm-hmm. And then once they started having that experience, they started like telling other people about it because they knew who would be a great fit and who would get the most benefit from it. And then they could just share about their own experience in the community, and like, I've got a new project going right now. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it, but the same exact thing is happening. I'm just reaching out to people, having conversations, and just asking them, hey, can you see yourself being a part of a community like that? And if so, what would make that a big win for you? Mm-hmm. And it's just having that conversation and then shutting up and letting them talk and listen to them, Yeah. So.
And I think that's one of your biggest strengths is your ability just to listen to people.
Yeah.
And I've gone into places where I've just listened to people and they're like, yeah, Rob, you gave us the greatest amount of insight. And I'm like, I said like 3 words, and other times I'm talking my head off and they're like, when's this guy gonna shut up? That's the reaction I'm getting. So there's I still don't know what the balance is, but I think you do. And I remember in San Diego, you, me, and Adam, who I had on the show before, Adam Raymer Brown. We sat at this I forget what restaurant it was, a Thai restaurant or something.
Yep. Yep.
And you just listened. I think the whole time we were there to Adam talk about his IT stuff, and then you heard me talk a little bit, and it was kind of interesting because I could see you think, and it was just it was kind of like magic happening. You could when you can see the level of thinking that occurred. I mean, it wasn't like you were straining or anything, but you were just taking it all in, and I could tell you were formulating some type of brilliant answer for Adam. I just don't recall what it was.
Well, I'll tell you, it's like I said that at the beginning, it's like don't look at this as a strategy or be writing notes about I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. It's like it's taking our eyes off of ourselves and what we want and focusing on somebody else and what they want and how we can be of service and of help to them.
Mm-hmm.
And when we just show up that way, and that is our intention, no matter who I'm in a conversation with, my intention is always I want to make them feel seen, heard, and understood. And that's really easy for me to do that. Mm-hmm. And so because I want to give them that experience because I know how seldom people get that experience. Mm-hmm. And so I want to give people that experience. And by doing so, we've heard that how we make people feel is always far more important than how we make, what we say to people or anything. And that's right. Totally true. It's totally true. And so, and like really, it just comes down to being able to let people talk and let people talk about what excites them, what motivates them to do whatever it is that they're doing. And they will give us so much insight, so much, that like we would never be able to get on our own if we didn't give them the time and the freedom to just be able to open up and share and let them know that like, it's okay to do that. It's safe to do that.
Yeah. And you brought up safe. And so, we've always come to this, and I've talked about this before on the show, is that, over years, it was always know, like, and trust. But I added that fourth element at the end of this year or the end of last year, beginning of this year is safety. We need to feel safe.
Yeah.
And that client sometimes doesn't need to know that they can trust you, because trust is always that thing that is earned, but they need to feel safe, using your service, using your, being in your presence, and that being safe sometimes overrules everything else.
Yeah. And I mean there's a gentleman who's a member of our community that I've known him for 15 years. I've been in tons of mastermind settings with this person, and I have never seen him share so openly, so candidly as I've seen him share in our community. And the thing is when he does share that way, it just attracts other people to him and stuff. They just like him for who he is, faults and everything, and he's done extremely well in the community. He's picked up a lot of business out of the community. And not that long ago, I was just on one of our group calls that he was on. I was commenting. I was like, I was like, man, it is so cool. It makes my heart feel good to just see you just talk so openly and so candidly, because I have not seen you in other places do that. And he's like, Kevin, he's like, I never felt like I was safe to do that. I was always concerned about what would people think, or would they judge me, or what have you. And he's like, and there's none of that here,
Yeah.
And That is so important. That is because like so many of these places, intentionally curated that way or not, it's more like a contest of
Mhm.
who can one up the other. Who can share the most wins, who can share, this is how I'm crushing it, and so it doesn't make people feel comfortable and like, what, yeah, we're doing really good over here. We're world class here. We got this covered, but you know what, man, I'm dealing with this big problem right here, and I could really use some help with this, but doggone it, this doesn't seem like the time or place to talk about that,
Yeah.
and we've got to have the time and the place for that too, and
Mhm.
especially when we're among like-minded people who have years of experience and expertise, and when they just see us show up that way, and they have life experience or business experience that relates to what we're going through, man, they just want to help. They
Mhm.
just want to help. And when you're in that spot and you're helping somebody who you're just heard something that they're going through and you can help because you have experience with that, you just end up going into this state of flow. And people get to see both of you and like just who you really are. And that's what attracts people to us, not trying to put on our game face and
Right.
be ready and like this is how we're crushing it and everything is great and that's not how we make real connections.
No, it's the vulnerability. It's the realness. The people need to sometimes see you in this raw form,
Yep.
but the honesty and you just offering a safe space to them, and it doesn't have to, you don't have to give them crayons and a coloring book, but come on, just make them feel appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do people learn more about you? Do they go to the Tribe for Leaders
Yeah, you
website? Do
can
they?
just, I mean, I'm on Facebook. I'll tell you, I have, man, if you would have told me a year ago, I would be running a podcast that wasn't even on my radar. But yet, we've got this podcast called Million Dollar Relationships. That this has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life.
Hmm.
And what we do on this podcast is I interview people. We've got 58 interviews already done, although I think the 11th one just released today. And so we got plenty more to release. But what we do is we focus on one question. The question is this: have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person? And so I've interviewed some pretty amazing entrepreneurs around this. They, most of them have never been asked that question before. So as a result, you get to see a side of them, sometimes emotional, that you don't usually get to see. And they get to share their story and their experience around this. And they also get to honor someone who has had an extremely profound impact on their life and on their business.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, as being the guy who gets to do these interviews, this has been so rewarding for me. And so for anybody listening to this, maybe you see yourself as a listener, go check it out. We're on Apple, Spotify, we're on all the major platforms. And if you are an entrepreneur that has somebody in your life that like, man, yeah, I know somebody, and a lot of times entrepreneurs, they know, man, well, Kev, there's a lot of people I know that and what I always say is like, I totally get that,
Right.
but think of one that just really stands out for you. You can mention the others, but like think about one that you really want to honor and stuff, and we'll focus there. So maybe you're that kind of a person, or maybe you know somebody. They're like, oh man, Kev, I know somebody that you got to interview them. Well, let them know about our podcast,
Hmm.
and I would love to do that. And so, like I said, running this podcast has been such an amazing experience. And so, no matter where you fit in, you're probably in one of those categories. And if so, hit me up on Facebook or what have you. I'd love to hear from you, and if it makes sense, interview you, or love to hear what what your thoughts are on the podcast or what have you. So.
See, that's awesome. This is what makes Kevin an e-hero. He's always out there helping others, regardless of the outcome, regardless of the paycheck. You know, you're constantly listening. You're constantly putting yourself out there. And you say yes when I ask if you want to come back on the show. And to me, that's pretty awesome. And you're just, and I'm glad that you and I have very similar, trajectories. It's one of those words I'm not even going to try to say again and again. But we came from the same kind of the mold, and we branched out a little bit on our own, and then we're coming back to the same. And we got our own podcast. We're doing this. We're doing that. We know a lot of the same people, And I'm not saying that we're the same. We're totally different, really. But we came from the same mold, and we have to honor Joe Polish for putting it out there. And I'm not saying that Joe was that guy that helped, but he initially was that helped me, discover all these great things. Now I've learned from other people, and there's another person I'll be interviewing in the next couple of days. His name's Charlie Mcdermott, and I went to Charlie's event in Philadelphia, and I presented a concept, an idea that I had, a marketing piece that really worked well for me. And I was presented an award for this marketing piece, and it was that catalyst from that award that I ended up going to Arizona and going to Infusionsoft network and meeting people, and on the plane ride back, I got this idea to write my first book.
Okay.
Now 36 books later, I have to credit Charlie for that. Charlie didn't tell me to write a book, but it was had I not won that award, that all that might have not ever happened.
Yeah. And it's always interesting to look back and see where these pivotal moments in our life were, because that hindsight is really 2020, and there's typically there's just a handful of them that were really pivotal moments that, like, what, that right there changed everything.
Right.
And a lot of times it involves people that were in our lives either for a season, or maybe they're still involved in our lives, but man, we just have so much admiration and respect for them, for the role that they have held in our lives. So
if you're listening, please go visit Kevin. He's on social. You'll find him everywhere. Listen to his podcast. Go to his tribeforleaders.com website, and become a better leader, become a better listener, emulate Kevin, and just go out there and learn how to make those connections. So till next time, thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next one.